Welcome to the Janome studio. In this video tutorial, I'll be telling you how to attach your standard binding to the front of a mini quilt using the Quilt Maker Pro 16. So I am so excited to show you how to attach your binding using the Quilt Maker Pro. This is a great technique whenever you have a mini quilt or a smaller item that you want to just quickly attach your binding. And so the first thing that we're going to do, I've already prepared my binding strips. I've cut them 2.5 inches wide and I've folded them wrong sides together in half. And so to begin, I'm going to open that out and I'm going to make a cut on the diagonal at about a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to trim that away. Once I do that, I'm going to fold down that portion by about 3/8 of an inch along that angle. So it's going to be folded at an angle just like this. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to place this on the edge of my mini quilt. And with this piece still open, I'm going to sew a straight line about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of my quilt. I'm going to sew a straight line 4 to 5 inches just to attach this piece to the binding. So I'm going to do that first. And to begin doing that, I'm going to push the needle down and bring it back up to bring my bobbin thread to the top. And I'm going to begin sewing just past the folded edge of my binding piece. I'm going to do a few stitches in place to secure my stitches. And I've got the ruler base on, and so I'm just going to guide my needle and my ruler foot against the ruler using that as a guide. So 4 to 5 inches, then I'm going to sew straight off the edge to the right. Okay, so I've done that. Now I'm going to fold this binding back over the way that it was. Okay, and now I'm going to sew back over onto my binding 1/4 of an inch in. Perfect, just like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew a straight line 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the binding and the mini quilt. And whenever I get about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom edge, I'm going to sew off the fabric at a diagonal. So it's also a really good idea if you need to have kind of a visual, since your binding blocks the fabric where you're going to stop. You can take a marking utensil and mark where on the binding you're going to be stopping so that you have a place for your eyes to see where you're going. Okay, so I've sewn off my fabric at a diagonal. And we're going to miter these corners. So we're just going to pinch that up in a little triangle and make those 2 pieces of fabric meet. Just like so. And I'm going to use my pen to just mark as a reference point where I'm going to be sewing up at a diagonal. And I'll be using my ruler again as a guide. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and attach this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you need to stop and adjust your fabric, you can definitely do that. This is not something that you need to rush whenever you're applying this binding. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mark my reference point once more. Okay, and I just sewed off of the fabric. Now I'm going to miter this corner, so I'll make a little 90-degree angle with these 2 pieces of fabric, kind of pinching them in on each other. Perfect, just like that. And now I'm going to sew back up the diagonal. Okay, so at this point, it's really important that you keep your binding fabric kind of towards the middle of the piece that you're binding so you don't sew over it. If it's on the outside, it could get in the way and become problematic. All right, so now we're gonna sew up this side. Okay, we're gonna miter this corner again, just like we've been doing with the other ones. So you're just repeating this for each of the 4 sides. Now I'm gonna sew across the top. Okay, we'll miter this corner, and this is our last corner, so we're almost finished. Okay, so back up that diagonal. Okay, and here's the really awesome part. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay this last piece of binding on top of our previous one, and we're gonna be trimming it right at the point where we started sewing our first line. So this is the previous sew line where I'm marking, and I'm gonna trim that off just above that line that I marked, and this is gonna tuck into the little sleeve that we made in our binding for an easy and quick finish. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish attaching this. Tuck this little sleeve down in, tuck the tail into the sleeve. All right, and now let's finish up. Okay, so when I approach this, I'm gonna slow down quite a bit because I don't have any pins securing this, and I don't want the ruler foot to catch that little sleeve and flip it back. So I'm just gonna slow down a little bit and make sure that, yeah, that's perfect. So it's not catching it, now I can continue sewing. And I'm just gonna go over my previous stitch line a couple times. All right, now we're ready to stop and snip our threads. And once we do that, we'll be able to unload our mini quilt, and we'll square everything up, trim away the excess batting, and then I'll talk about the next step. All right, so now that we have taken our quilt sandwich off of the frame and we've squared it up and trimmed away the excess batting and backing, we have this beautifully attached binding that we're ready to take the folded edge and flip it over to the back side of the quilt. So you're going to do that around the entire perimeter of your mini quilt or other object that you've bound. And you're just gonna clip all the way around, making sure that you miter the corners nicely, folding the edges in to meet at a really nice clean finish. And so once you fold this all the way around, you're probably wondering how you're going to finish this. And so since this is the back of the quilt, if we were to stitch this by machine, the stitches would show on the front of the quilt. And so that may not be ideal. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hand finish this. So you can use a milliner's needle, like a size 11, and choose a thread that's gonna blend in really well with your binding color. So in this case, I would probably use a white thread because that's the color of the binding and coincidentally my backing. So that's gonna blend in really nicely. And whenever your piece is finished, this is what it'll look like. And you bound it on the long arm, which is a really great method to use. This is the back side of it. Super clean, nice finish. And so now that you know this shortcut, I really hope that you'll take the time to try it, especially on smaller projects like mini quilts, pot holders, and even Christmas stockings you could try.